The night air at Murtala Muhammad International Airport was restless. Neon lights flickered against polished floors as travelers dragged their bags, eager for destinations beyond Nigeria's borders. But among the hurried footsteps and whispered announcements, one man stood out, not because he wanted to, but because the weight of fate had finally cornered him. Cameras flashed like lightning bolts, microphones thrust forward like spears, and officers in dark uniforms tightened their grip on his wrists. It was him, the man the nation had worshipped as a savior, a philanthropist, a self-made billionaire. His face had adorned magazines, his cars had blocked Lagos roads in long convoys, his mansions were spoken of in hushed disbelief. Yet tonight, he was reduced to a trembling figure, head bowed, lips dry, as the world chanted his name with venom rather than admiration. Arrested for fraud, the headlines would scream before dawn. Caught at the airport. What the cameras could not capture was the heaviness of shame pressing on his chest, or the echo of his mother's old warnings chasing him across time. He had once been a boy running barefoot through the dusty paths of a forgotten village. But greed had given him wings too heavy to carry. And now, those wings had broken in public view. Long before the flashing lights, there was a boy named Chaik, born in a village where rivers sang louder than radios and the soil knew the names of every child. His father was a fisherman, his mother a petty trader who carried baskets of peppers to the market, her feet cracked from years of walking the earth. In that village, wealth was measured in goats and harvest, not in private jets or mansions. But Chaik's eyes had always reached beyond the horizon. He watched his mother weep at night when debts piled up. He watched his father cough blood after too many seasons on the river. Poverty was not just a condition, it was a curse that gnawed at pride and turned laughter into silence. The elders would gather under the Irako tree, telling tales of ancestors who honored the gods, who lived simply and died respected. But Chaik was not interested in stories of simplicity. He wanted more. He wanted to escape the dusty footprints of his childhood. He wanted the world to know his name. In African villages, success was never personal, it was communal. A child's triumph lifted an entire family, sometimes an entire clan. So, when Chaik gained admission into university, the drums of celebration thundered across compounds. Elders blessed him, saying, "You are the one who will wash away your family's shame. Do not return empty-handed." Those words sank into him like a vow. He carried them to school, where city lights revealed new desires. On campus, Chaik met young men who wore expensive perfumes, drove cars, and spent money as though it grew from their fingertips. They whispered of foreign bank accounts, digital shortcuts, and fast money that bypassed sweat. For the first time, Chaik realized that education alone would not deliver him from hunger. There were paths, dark, dangerous paths, that promised the wealth of kings. Every man's downfall begins with a temptation disguised as a gift. For Chaik, it came in the form of Adiz, a woman whose beauty silenced rooms. She was not just a lover, she was an initiator, a whisperer of secrets. She introduced him to a world hidden behind glowing laptop screens, where lies became gold and deception turned into wired dollars. At first, he resisted. His conscience, shaped by his mother's prayers and his father's warnings, still tugged at him. But Adiz's voice was honeyed poison. She said, "Why suffer when you can live like those who mock you? The world respects only those who have wealth, not those who struggle." And so, one night, beneath the dim glow of a cybercafe, Chaik typed his first deceitful email. The screen blinked with promises, and as the money trickled in, his hesitation dissolved. He had taken his first step into the shadows. But in his village, nothing done in secret escaped the gaze of the unseen. Before Chaik was born, his family had been bound by a covenant. His great-grandfather, in desperation for wealth, had made a vow to the gods of the river, that no descendant would seek dishonest riches, lest the river rise and swallow everything they loved. Chaik's mother knew this. She had prayed fervently for her son to avoid the shortcuts of greed. She had warned him with tears, "Do not stain your hands with wealth that has no blessing. The river gods remember." But Chaik had laughed it off. He was a child of a new age, too modern for ancestral warnings. He believed only in what glittered, not in what whispered. Soon, the trickle of money became a flood. He bought his first car while his classmates still begged for transport fare. He dressed in imported suits, hosted parties that stretched till dawn, and gained followers who worshipped his audacity. The name Chaik became synonymous with success. But behind every luxury item he purchased, behind every camera flash that celebrated him, there lingered the quiet footsteps of the ancestors, watching, waiting, patient as the tide. Wealth has a way of silencing suspicion. The louder the sound of riches, the quieter the whispers of conscience. For Chaik, the once timid village boy, success came like a thunderstorm, flooding every corner of his life. Within 2 years, his small cyber tricks evolved into vast empires of deceit. He moved from cramped cafes to private offices equipped with glowing computers, guarded like fortresses. Men who once mocked his ragged sandals now bowed to him, seeking favors and contracts. Women who once dismissed him now waited by his gate, dressed in silk and painted smiles. Lagos, a city that never sleeps, became his playground. He bought cars that glistened under the sun like freshly oiled skins of crocodiles. His convoy stretched so long that traffic officers saluted in reverence. Mansions rose from the ground as though the soil itself obeyed his command. Glass walls, swimming pools, golden gates, and chandeliers that glowed brighter than village moonlight. Philanthropy followed, not from compassion but from strategy. Chaik began sponsoring scholarships, donating to orphanages, and paying for community boreholes. The people praised him as a savior. Churches invited him to sit in the front pew, politicians sought his donations, and newspapers crowned him the young lion of wealth. To the world, he was a symbol of possibility. To himself, he was proof that shortcuts worked. But wealth does more than change clothes and houses. It changes souls. Chaik no longer recognized the boy who once feared hunger. He spoke with arrogance, his laughter carrying the weight of dominance. The river that once whispered warnings in his dreams had grown silent, drowned out by the noise of endless parties. He began to see himself as untouchable. After all, had the gods not watched silently as his riches multiplied? Had the police not smiled at his convoys? Had the same villagers who once warned him not to chase quick money not now named children after him? In his heart, he believed he had defeated both poverty and prophecy. But fate is patient. Adiz, the woman who first guided him into darkness, remained in his life like a shadow attached to his success. She demanded her share of his wealth, her voice still dripping with sweet poison. But Chaik had grown beyond her. He sought newer faces, younger beauties, fresher temptations. Still, Adiz carried secrets. She knew the origins of his empire, the rituals of lies that had built it. And secrets, like rivers dammed for too long, always find ways to overflow. Every covenant has a line, and Chaik was destined to cross his. In his village, the elders had long preserved a sacred grove by the river, a place where sacrifices were made once a year to appease the spirits. Chaik had avoided returning home for years, ashamed of his beginnings. But when he finally returned, this time as a billionaire, he came not with humility but with pride. He drove into the village with cars that roared louder than ancestral drums, his convoy scattering goats and children alike. He wore a suit too shiny for the dusty roads, and his security men pushed elders aside as though tradition itself was an inconvenience. When the annual sacrifice came, the villagers expected Chaik to honor his lineage, to pour palm wine for the river gods, to bow as his fathers did. But instead, he mocked the ritual, tossing bundles of money into the river as though the spirits were beggars waiting for currency. The priests gasped. The elders murmured. His mother wept in silence. But Chaik laughed, declaring, "Money is my sacrifice. Wealth is my God." In that moment, the covenant was broken. The river, patient for generations, stirred in anger. Wealth without restraint breeds hunger that cannot be satisfied. With fame and fortune came desires Chaik could not tame. He filled his mansions with women, each more beautiful than the last, each treated as a disposable jewel. What began as indulgence turned into obsession. One night, drunk on wine and pride, he pursued a woman forbidden to him, the daughter of a powerful politician, promised to another man. Their affair, reckless and arrogant, was hidden for a while. But secrets have shadows that grow longer with time. The scandal broke in whispers at first, then in headlines. The politician's wrath was swift. Enemies he had bribed into silence now found reasons to rise against him. Contracts collapsed. Banks began to investigate. The web of fraud that had built his empire trembled under the weight of exposure. As troubles mounted, strange things began to happen. His fleet of cars suffered inexplicable accidents. His mansions caught fire under mysterious circumstances. At night, he dreamed of rivers rising, swallowing his wealth, drowning his laughter. He would wake up drenched in sweat, the sound of rushing waters still in his ears. He tried to buy peace with offerings at churches and gifts to traditional priests. But no sacrifice could undo what had been broken. The curse of his ancestors had awakened. Investigations grew louder. Foreign governments traced fraudulent wires back to his accounts. International agencies began to circle. Former partners betrayed him for reduced sentences. The media, once his loyal ally, now feasted on every scandal like vultures on carcass. Yet, Chaik remained defiant. He still threw parties, still posed for cameras, still bought cars as though drowning could be delayed by speed. But beneath the shine, cracks widened. His empire was collapsing, piece by piece. And then came the day he chose to leave Nigeria. He booked a private ticket, intending to vanish into foreign lands with what remained of his fortune. But fate, patient and merciless, was already waiting at the airport. The airport was unusually tense that evening. The hum of engines, the clatter of trolleys, the restless shuffle of travelers, all seemed to fade into a single sound, the approaching footsteps of destiny. Chaik moved through the VIP section with sunglasses covering eyes that had not slept in days. His heart beat like a talking drum, but outwardly he walked with the arrogance of a man still convinced he was untouchable. He had chosen Europe as his escape, a place where he believed his money, stashed in offshore accounts, would shield him from disgrace. The private jet awaited, fueled and polished, its metallic body gleaming like salvation. He thought the worst was behind him. He thought he could still outrun fate. But fate does not need speed, it waits. As he approached the departure gate, a wall of men in dark suits appeared. Their badges glinted under the fluorescent lights. They were not ordinary security. They were agents whose names carried weight, whose shadows stretched across borders. "Sir, you need to come with us." Those words, though spoken softly, thundered through Chaik's chest. His vision blurred as cameras suddenly appeared from the corners. Reporters swarmed like vultures, microphones stabbing the air, flashes exploding like lightning over a battlefield. The young billionaire, once worshipped, now stood handcuffed under the full glare of the public. News travels faster than the harmattan wind. Before the night ended, the arrest was splashed across television screens, trending on social media, and whispered in markets from Lagos to distant villages. Popular billionaire arrested for fraud at the airport. That was the headline, repeated until it burned into the nation's memory. Videos of him being led away in handcuffs went viral. His once proud shoulders slumped, his once expensive suit now a uniform of shame. People who once sang his praises now spit his name like poison. Churches quietly removed plaques engraved with his donations. Politicians denied knowing him. Friends who had feasted on his wealth vanished like shadows at dawn. Even Adiz, the woman who first lured him into deceit, disappeared, her absence sharper than betrayal. In the court of public opinion, Chaik was no longer a hero. He was a fraudster, a deceiver, a fallen idol. The legal system moved with the slowness of bureaucracy but the certainty of a storm. Charges piled up like stones: wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. Foreign governments demanded extradition. Bank accounts froze. Properties were seized. Cars were towed away like abandoned carcasses. In the sterile silence of prison cells, Chaik faced a reality he could not buy his way out of. Gone were the chandeliers, gone were the women, gone were the cameras that once adored him. In their place were cold floors, iron bars, and the haunting chorus of inmates laughing at the man who once owned cities. He tried to call allies, but phones no longer answered. He tried to bribe, but even money betrayed him. It had lost its power. The empire he built on deceit crumbled faster than it had risen. At night, when the prison grew quiet, Chaik dreamed again of the river. But now it was no longer calm. The waters roared, foaming with fury, sweeping away mansions, cars, and faces of those who once adored him. He saw himself drowning, hands clawing for air, the weight of his wealth dragging him deeper. The covenant had caught up with him. His great-grandfather's vow, broken in arrogance, had delivered its price. No matter how modern the world had become, the spirits of the land had not forgotten. In his village, the elders shook their heads. "The river has claimed what was promised," they murmured. His mother wept, not for his arrest, but for his soul. For she knew this was not just the justice of man, it was the justice of gods. There is something more frightening than noise, the silence after disgrace. Once, Chaik's name echoed in every conversation. Now, people avoided it as though mentioning him would invite curses. His mansion stood abandoned, dust settling over once polished floors. His luxury cars, once symbols of envy, rusted in impound lots. Even the women who once competed for his attention denied ever knowing him. His story became a warning whispered to children, "Do not follow the path of Chaik, for it leads only to shame." Every tragedy is a mirror, reflecting not just the fallen but those who watch. Chaik's story was not just about one man, it was about the dangerous hunger that lives in many hearts. It was about the temptation to trade honesty for shortcuts, the arrogance of mocking tradition, and the inevitability of consequences. And so the story closes as African stories always do, with a lesson wrapped in a proverb. The man who mocks the river forgets that water has no bones, yet it can drown even the strongest. Chaik rose like a lion, but he fell like a sparrow, undone not by enemies, but by his own hands. His story remains, carved into memory, a reminder that wealth without honor is poverty disguised in gold.